Started. Basically, first, I just want to start off, I guess, with more of like an explanation of who I am, what I do, and that sort of thing. Basically, when I was a little girl, I had an interest in being an astronaut and going to Mars and having all these big ideas regarding space. And so basically, I just started out by trying to learn as much about space as I really could. Obviously, I didn't know too much. No one in my family really had any sort of science or space background. So it was really just wanting to learn as much information about space as I could. So that started out just by reading books, watching videos, whatever regarding space. I eventually went to space camp in Huntsville, Alabama, which was really amazing, just to be able to absorb all that information about space and space history and the future of space exploration. And so I just kind of continued going there, trying to learn as much as I could, and also going there kind of helped me figure out what kind of path I would want to take. So that's kind of the really interesting thing about wanting to become an astronaut, is that you can't necessarily go to college and major in being an astronaut. You know, it's not something that we're up to that point yet. You have to kind of have a career to become an astronaut as a career. So that's kind of the interesting part of it. So really, I was trying to figure out, what kind of astronaut would I want to be? And so by going to space camp and doing, like the pretend missions and just being a kid, I learned a lot more about, the fact that I didn't necessarily want to be like the pilot or the commander. I was much more interested in maybe being the one to go and do an EVA or do some sort of science. And so I've kind of taken that, still in that same path of wanting to be some sort of a mission specialist, research scientist, something along those lines. So right now I'm studying astrobiology. So the plan is to become an astrobiologist and eventually apply to the astronaut selection process. And astrobiology lines up really well, actually, with a mission to Mars. So just to kind of give you guys an idea of kind of what I'm studying, what I'm doing, astrobiology is basically any sort of science in space, to be honest. So really having it as a major, you study every biology, every physics, every chemistry, every math. You go all the way in all the areas of science. So you are really just knowing a little bit about everything, or kind of a lot about everything, to be honest. And you are studying that and then seeing how that can apply to space. So with that, there's all sorts of research opportunities. So you can study plants in space. You can study bacteria in space. You can even go as far as to studying entire planets if you really wanted to. You could see, is this one more habitable than this one, and do that sort of research. So there's a whole lot of opportunity with that. And kind of looking towards a mission to Mars, the idea of astrobiology would be wanting to learn as much about Mars as we possibly can. So that's really the idea for the first missions to Mars. So right now, the plan is to start having missions to Mars in the early 2030s. That is our goal right now. So there's a new rocket being built, a new capsule, new everything kind of going into play. And yeah, everything is hopefully to be ready for the early 2030s to finally have people go to Mars. So the idea of the mission would be, just basically trying to learn as much as we can about Mars. So on the way there will obviously be work being done. It will be the furthest humans have ever been from Earth. So there will be a lot of experiments happening even on the way to Mars, testing different radiation levels, or, things going on in that area of space. We've never explored that area of space. So even though we're not quite to Mars yet, there's still a lot of experiments that can be done and a lot of research and knowledge to be gained. However, once we get to Mars, we are going to be living there for a good bit of time, doing research. Of course, we're going to be doing work and science and all of that, but a lot of the task or things that we're going to have to be doing, a lot of it is most likely going to be like chores. We have to make sure the habitat is staying clean, and make sure, cleaning air filters or any of those little things that you may not think of. That's probably going to be the majority of our tasks. We're probably going to have to grow some of our own food, so tending to the plants or little things like that. So of course, we're going to be doing the nitty-gritty science research, but there's going to be a lot of those smaller tasks as well. So regarding astrobiology, in terms of what that plays into the mission. That would be, for example, like studying the soil samples from Mars. We want to, obviously we've had rovers that have collected soil samples, done tests, but we want to go even further than that. We want to continue researching what components are actually in there. Are there any resources on Mars that we could possibly use here on Earth? Is there, an issue here on Earth that would need those resources? So kind of really understanding what potential we have with that. Obviously, the big thing with Mars is all the water that's there. Everyone's obsessed with the water that's on Mars. Very exciting. We love to see it. So we have found ice on Mars. We have found liquid water. We have found steam. We have found actually like liquid lakes on Mars. So that's pretty crazy that there's huge bodies of that liquid water there. So there's a lot of potential with that liquid water. And with water comes the potential for life. So that's really the big task that we will have with people going to Mars. We really want to figure out if there's life on Mars. That's been the big question for goodness, who knows how long. So finally, we will get that answered once we have people going to Mars. But basically, it would just be testing the different water samples for signs of any sort of bacterial life. So there's all sorts of different environments on Mars that we think could harbor life. I know one that's like pretty up there. So at the equator, we have found steam. So a hot, watery environment is very good for bacteria. So that has a lot of potential. But even in some of the liquid water around the surface of Mars, there's a lot of potential with that as well. So yeah, finding any signs of bacterial life would be amazing. And also in general, just studying the atmosphere on Mars. So obviously, we have a lot of big ideas with Mars. A lot of people have big ideas, whether that's colonizing it, whether that's terraforming it. We have a lot of big ideas for Mars to potentially be like a second Earth, or, a stepping stone for further space exploration and all of this. So those first missions to Mars are really going to be understanding realistically, what can we do with Mars? So obviously we have all those big ideas. We're really going to get a better understanding of how possible those are. Is it possible to thicken the atmosphere to hold in oxygen, bring that water to the surface and terraform it into something like another Earth? Is it possible to have it as a second home? Can we really colonize it? So those are kind of all the big questions that we're really going to get a better understanding of once we actually get there. So yeah, that's kind of all the plans with Mars. And then I guess to give you guys like a little bit more of some of the things that I've done so far to kind of get to where I am right now, in case any of you guys are interested in not necessarily only becoming an astronaut, but getting involved in the space industry as well. So just for you guys to know, to actually apply to the astronaut selection process, the criteria is, it's not the easiest stuff to do, but it's kind of, they have like bare minimums, which aren't too difficult to achieve. So basically you have to have your master's degree in some sort of STEM field. So that's anything of your choosing. So there's a whole lot of different things that you can do with that, or you can also become a pilot to enter the astronaut selection process. Past that, you have to have a few years of work experience. So basically they want you to have gotten your degree and done some sort of work. They want you to have had a job in it. Or if you're a pilot, they tend to like for you to have at least 1,000 hours of flying. So that's kind of the credentials for that. And then basically beyond that, you just have to pass their physical to make sure you're fit in good health and that you can be an astronaut. So those are the bare minimums. But beyond that, basically you can add anything to your resume that you feel should be added, or something that's important about what you do. So that's kind of the important part about looking at becoming an astronaut, because let's say you do have your master's degree and you've worked, let's say, at NASA for however many years. You have to think about how many other people in that application also have a master's degree in, let's say, aerospace engineering, a very generic major that most people go into when looking to become an astronaut. And so you really have to think, how can you set yourself apart? How can you be the best aerospace engineer out of all the others? And so that's really the important part when looking to become an astronaut. You have to figure out what else you've done. So basically for me, I was really looking at any sort of opportunity to build up my resume, but also at the same time, just get involved in real life research that's going on. And also, build these experiences to be able to put on my resume, but that also connected to what I wanted to do. So, for example, I do want to become a mission specialist. I have got my pilot's license. I have like my bare minimum, well, not bare minimum, but I have my pilot's license, but I haven't necessarily gone to all the way getting my commercial or anything like that, because that's not necessarily what I want to do as my career. So I focus a lot more on the sciencey side, a lot more of the research side. So although I am exploring some of the other things, just so I can put that on my resume and say that I've done it, which I do like flying. I like it for like leisurely flying, but definitely not professionally. That's a little beyond me. But yeah, it's basically something that I was able to do. That I really love doing. But yeah, it's not necessarily something I want to do professionally. So I've kind of continued to build on stuff that I felt met what I wanted to do. So that kind of brought me to Project PoSSUM, which has been really amazing. So basically, Project PoSSUM is just a group of everyday people, citizens, call ourselves citizen scientists, and we are just doing all sorts of research to, yeah, just benefit or get out of or do something involving space and science, just because it's something that we're interested in. So basically, you're able to do any sort of opportunities you want to do, but there's some really cool research that you can get involved with. So for example, with them, I've been able to do microgravity flights, so being able to feel what it's like to float. So for us, we did a microgravity flight up in Canada. We were testing a spacesuit, how it functioned in microgravity, so that was really cool to be able to feel what it's like to float and possibly be in space. So that was really awesome. We do a lot, in talking about spacesuits, we do a lot of testing with a spacesuit. So we work with a spacesuit company called Final Frontier Spacesuit Design, and we test different versions of their suits. So we've tested their IVA suit, their EVA suit. Basically, we want to put the suit through different environments to make sure it is fit for a mission if it were to go up on one. So they work a lot, in the private industry. So let's say Virgin Galactic starts sending space tourists, and let's say they needed to put those space tourists in a spacesuit. It's possible that, Final Frontier could sell their suit to Virgin Galactic or anything like that. So we put it through a whole bunch of different tests to make sure it's able to do that. For example, I've also done water survival training. So we've learned basic water survival, but we also connected it back to space. So again, we were in the spacesuits, we were swimming in the spacesuits, we were pulling ourselves into life rafts while wearing the spacesuits, putting it through all sorts of tasks, seeing like how exhausting is it as a person to be swimming in that suit. Is it actually manageable to, say here, if this happens, you have to pull yourself into a life raft while wearing the suit. So we did a lot of tests like that, which was really awesome. Along with PoSSUM, I've been able to do some different research campaigns. So taking images of a type of cloud that we have an interest in, and different things like that. So the really neat part about PoSSUM that I believe is that I'm able to do these really awesome experiences that obviously will be good for a resume or anything like that, but it's also for real life research. All the things that we're doing actually has a purpose. Yeah, it's really fun to frolic in the water in a spacesuit and float in microgravity. All of that is totally fun and would be totally awesome just to do it for fun. But the really awesome part is that we are actually gaining something from it. We're actually collecting real data that's going into real scientific papers. And so that's the really cool part about, all the stuff doing with PoSSUM. So really it's important to kind of find what your interest is, whether that is, being a pilot, being a scientist, going down maybe the medical route to going into space. There's a whole lot of options, and even not even looking at becoming an astronaut, but there just in general are so many different space careers that you don't really think of. Looking at the space industry, there's someone that has to sit there and figure out how to package the food to go up to the International Space Station every few months. They send resupply missions. Let's say an astronaut says, I want dumplings next month. There's someone that has to figure out, is it possible to freeze dry dumplings and send them up into space, or things like that. There's people that study a lot of the psychology aspects. So there's actually someone that studies food fatigue. The astronauts can't eat I guess sticking with dumplings, the astronauts can't eat dumplings every single day of the week for the entire time that they're up there. They would absolutely lose their mind eating the same thing over and over again. So someone actually studies what they eat, when, how often they eat that meal, how that affects them, all the psychological aspects of that. Does that affect their work? They ate tacos twice this week. Did that cause any problems? So there's someone that studies all those little details. So there are tens of thousands of people that contribute to the space industry in some way, whether that is, engineers talking about food, medical officers, down to the people who sweep the floor. I mean, everyone is so important in the space industry to make sure that everything is safe, properly put together for space travel. And so, yeah, that's really kind of my biggest thing to you guys is really don't be scared to explore all the different things in space. Like, let's say you are like kind of interested in space, but you're also really interested in like psychology, and that's something you want to study. You know, maybe it's possible for you to do space psychology, which would be really amazing. So it's really cool that you're able to connect different interests of yours. So you don't necessarily have to pick or choose one. It's possible that you can kind of do a little bit of all of them. So yeah, my best advice to you guys would really just be, once you figure out what you're interested in doing, really just try to learn as much as you can about it, possibly find someone who maybe has some sort of similar career to be some sort of role model, ask them for advice. You know, how did they get to that point that they are? Yeah, really just learn more about it, and then seeing what sort of opportunities you can build off of that. So, you know, start in your local area, start at your school, start at all those, you know, very simple levels. You know, I started just by going to the library to look for a book about space because I didn't know anything about it. And so, you know, I think a really good example to like that is, for example, let's say you're interested in robotics and you want to do space robotics. I think, you know, with that, you know, it's really awesome to be able, you know, do a robotics competition while you're still, you know, in middle and high school, and be able to, you know, maybe build your own robot at home. That could be something that you could easily put on your resume in the future that, you know, I built my own robot from scratch. But a bigger thing is to make sure you guys are telling other people about what your dreams are, what you're interested in, because you never know where the opportunities are going to come from. Let's say you're in that same position, you're interested in doing space robotics, you're at a robotics competition. You know, obviously those feel very distant from each other. You know, let's say you tell, you're just chit-chatting, you happen to mention to one of the judges, they're like, yeah, I'm actually interested in going all the way into space robotics. They may happen to know someone who does that. So you really never know where those opportunities are going to kind of connect. So never be afraid to tell people what you're interested in doing, because you never know where those opportunities are going to lead. So really, you know, start in your local area, start looking for any opportunities to build on what you guys are interested in. Don't be afraid to tell people about it. Continue to work hard. Obviously, a lot of these dreams feel so far away. I know, you know, obviously talking about the mission to Mars, Mars still isn't even an idea until at least the 2030s. So I totally get it. Some of these dreams do feel really far, but it's all about enjoying the process along the way. Obviously, you know, for me, I've been able to do so many cool experiences getting to that point. So, you know, you never know what experiences it can take you along the way. So really go with that. You know, maybe try to find someone who can support you in your dreams. You know, for me, my dad was a huge support for me. But really, it's really awesome to have someone to tell you, like, yeah, you can do it. Yeah, that's feasible. Whether that is, you know, a friend, a parent, a teacher, whatever it may be, someone just to kind of constantly hype you up, I guess, in terms of what your dream is. So I think that's also something that's really important to actually fulfilling your dreams and actually getting there. Trying to think if there's anything else. I mean, I do want to at least have some time in case any of you guys have some questions for me, so that way I'm actually talking about what y'all are interested in.
So yeah, if anybody has a question, feel free to drop it in the chat or unmute yourself, go on camera, or small group, so it's chill. I'll start off with some questions we got beforehand then until they start rolling in.
Sure.
So how did you get involved in the PoSSUM Academy? Is it an application or what's the process?
Yeah, so I started Project PoSSUM when I was 15, which was totally unheard of. Everyone else in PoSSUM, they're all grown adults. They have their own families, their own careers. They're very well-established adults. So me starting at 15 was very bizarre, but actually the way it all worked out, it was just kind of, I guess, somewhat at the right moment at the right time, I guess. So basically I had, again, like I was saying, I was going to any sort of camps that I thought would, you know, benefit or help me learn something. I went to a camp over in Virginia, Virginia Spaceflight Academy, and basically PoSSUM originally was based out of Embry-Riddle University in Florida. So they were basically, you know, their own private thing, but they were just based out of the university. So when I went to camp in Virginia, one of my counselors knew that I was interested in becoming an astronaut, and she was like, oh, she actually went to Embry-Riddle, and she was just having a summer job as a counselor. And she was like, oh, well, I heard about this thing starting at my university. I don't really know what it is. I don't really know if you can do it. but it looks like they're doing some cool research, I think. It could be something to look into. So we looked into it. Me and my dad looked into it, of course. We gave the kind of head of PoSSUM, we gave him a call, and we were talking to him about it. And basically, we were just spitballing any reason why I should join. So they were like, well, we will be doing decompression and training in a chamber. And I was like, well, I've scuba dived before, so like I'm used to a mask, even though like it's no way similar, but basically just trying to give any reason why he should let me join. So basically what we ended up deciding on was that I would go to, basically you go to like an introductory week, I guess, and you learn about PoSSUM and do like a few things like decompression training, G-force training, a few things like that. And then you're able to do any other, thing within the organization. So we agreed to that, and he said, you'll come to this introductory week. After that, we will see. So I went and I did that. And there's actually we actually had like a test. It wasn't like if you fail, you don't get to be a part of it, but we had like a little test just to test all the knowledge that we had learned from the classes we had taken. Anyway, and I ended up scoring the highest out of everyone who was like in my class. And so after that, they were like, okay, you can stay. So it was definitely a lot of just proving myself, proving that I could keep up with some of these older folks. Luckily, my class was relatively one of the youngest, to be honest. I mean, definitely nowhere near my age. So obviously I was 15. Probably like the next youngest person was like 24. But that was definitely a lot younger than some of their other, classes. So that was really cool because I was with college students. Obviously I was only 15, but being with some college students definitely made me feel a little bit better. But yeah, basically I was just proving that I was able to do the same sort of research that they were. And yeah, now I've been kind of helping PoSSUM bring their age down a little bit, or getting more younger participants. They definitely have been getting a lot more 18-year-olds involved in the program. So I don't think they're testing the waters as much with 15-year-olds, just because they just want you to be an adult. But yeah, they're doing a lot more stuff with 18-year-olds. And yeah, it's basically just an application process. We went through all the normal stuff of just going through the application process and they get back to you. But it's a really awesome organization with people from all over the world. And yeah, that's kind of the story of PoSSUM.
Which internship or program are you planning on doing next?
Yeah, that's a really awesome question. So it's actually kind of still coming together, but I will hopefully be starting an internship in the next few weeks with Jacobs, which is a NASA contractor. So it will be an internship working directly with them, which will hopefully lead directly into a NASA job. So that is all very exciting. I'm super excited. I've actually met many people who've worked at Jacobs before, so I'm really excited. Love the company, so I'm really excited for that. So basically, yeah, I would be doing a few different things, just some work in terms of satellites, some biology stuff as well. So for right now, of course, it's going to be a virtual internship until all this mess is kind of fixed and stuff. But yeah, hopefully. Eventually it will lead to me actually going over to Jacobs. But yeah, so it's still working out the details and stuff of all the specifics of what I'll be doing. But yeah, that's the plan right now that I'm really, really excited about to start some sort of new thing. Obviously being a sophomore in college, everyone pushes you need to do research, you need to do internships, blah, blah, blah. So, finally I can tell people that I'm doing something. So yeah, so hopefully that all comes together just fine.
Well, oh, okay, there are some questions in the chat. So one is, what are you most looking forward to in your future?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a whole lot of exciting stuff. I'm going to obviously continue doing as much as I can. So obviously school is kind of my first priority, especially with college. Professors don't care what you're doing. They want you in class, or, they want you. It's very different from a high school. Especially for me, I skipped out. Well, I'm not going to say I skipped out. I did all my work and stuff, but I traveled a lot during high school. It was pretty easy to just kind of leave and do something, because I wasn't necessarily just going on vacation. I was doing something beneficial. College is much different, so it's kind of my top priority. But yeah, I continue to do a whole lot of other stuff as well. My next plans, I do want to continue flying a little bit more, so I want to get my next rating, which is my instrument rating. So right now I have basically my visual rating, and so the next would be instrument. And I want to get that just because visual rating, honestly, it's kind of useless. Like if there's clouds, you can't fly. So like, I want to, be able to fly a little bit more than that. So I'll probably get my instrument rating, continue doing any sort of things with PoSSUM that kind of fit my school schedule and that I enjoy to do. So just kind of keeping an eye out for any sort of PoSSUM things. Obviously with COVID, that's kind of a little pushback too. And yeah, just continue looking for any sort of research internships, those sort of things, to continue getting involved in more astrobiology related stuff, I guess.
The next question in the chat is, what made you decide what major you wanted to pursue in college?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, obviously, no one really talks about astrobiology, to be honest. It's a pretty new thing, so it's kind of hard to find if it's something that you're interested in. So basically, when I was younger, I didn't really know what I wanted to study in college. I kind of knew where I wanted to end up, but I didn't really know how to get there. And so my first thought was that I would study astrophysics. That just seemed like what I would want to do. Basically, I wasn't interested in doing any sort of engineering. I don't feel like I have the engineer brain. I don't feel like I'm fit for that. So I wasn't interested in doing any sort of engineering. And so in terms of space majors, that kind of just left astronomy, astrophysics, and that's really all I knew about as far as space majors were aware. Obviously, there's also like planetary science and that sort of stuff. But yeah, so I figured I would do astrophysics. I didn't really have much of a reason why. It just seemed like the only other space major that I could actually handle. So actually, when I was like 12, I spoke on a panel talking about future missions to Mars in the 2030s. And yeah, someone had asked me what I would want to study in the future. I mentioned astrophysics because why not? And actually, one of the other members on the panel, she was an astrobiologist. And so basically, after the panel was over, she came up to me and she was like, "So I hear you're interested in doing astrophysics." And I was like, "Yeah, that's probably what I'll study in college." And she looked at me and she said, "Well, you need to study astrobiology instead, and here's why." And she basically told me everything about what she did, about what astrobiology is. And basically, astrobiology is really similar to astrophysics, but it gives you a little more. So basically, astrophysics really eventually just kind of just funnels down to physics specifically. And so what she was explaining, although it is called astrobiology, it really doesn't, you can kind of decide, you can kind of hone in a little bit more on physics or biology, but it really doesn't fully focus on just that. You get a lot of a wider range of all of the sciences, whereas with astrophysics, you really focus mainly on physics. You wouldn't get nearly as much biology experience, nearly as much chemistry experience. So that's really what interests me about astrobiology, is that I wanted to know something about everything. I wanted to have a little bit of knowledge, and especially looking at, for example, like a mission to Mars, I felt that was super important. Let's say for a mission to Mars, we can only have, 4 or 6 people. You want to know as much information as you can. You don't want to be, for example, let's say on the mission, let's say I only know stuff about physics, but then we have to, look for bacteria. Like, as a physicist, what would I know about bacteria? And so I really wanted to keep my options open to where, if I needed to study some sort of physical or physics aspect, I could do that. If I needed to do some sort of chemistry experiment, I could do that. If I needed to do some sort of biology experiment, I could do that. And so, yeah, it was really just all about me wanting to learn a lot about all the different things and how they apply to space. With astrobiology, you also study a good bit of geology as well. So that was also part of the decision. But yeah, I'm super glad I chose it. I mean, obviously, being only a sophomore, I haven't had like a direct astrobiology class, but I mean, I have loved all the classes I have so far. So pretty good.
Yep, well, that looks like that's all our questions for today. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you guys for your questions, and thanks for having me.